Welcome to the Breakthrough Advisor Podcast. In this podcast, we inspire advisors with ideas and pathways to break through barriers and build a thriving retirement income business. We will interview innovative technology developers, business leaders, and successful advisors, then help you organize and execute these ideas to move your business forward.
Hey folks, this is Jack Martin. I'm the virtual CMO for Simplicity InsurMark. Thank you very much for joining us today. We appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedules to drop in to the Breakthrough Advisor podcast. I'll tell you what other advisors are telling us, that this is the place where they are coming to get their bi-weekly dose of insight, strategy, technique, and inspiration for taking their business to the next level. And so we're happy that we've been able to deliver that for you in 24, and we've got a great program mapped out for you in 25. We're super excited about that. Today, I've got Tom Rieman join us. He's going to share what he calls practice intel. Hey, Tom, thanks for joining us on the Breakthrough Advisor podcast today.
Hey, Jack, happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Hey, for the few people who maybe don't know, who Tom Rieman is and what your story is, maybe catch us up a little bit.
Oh my goodness. So, I've been in the industry almost 30 years. I have a pretty eclectic background. So I have a pretty strong academic background in process performance improvement. I have experience as an advisor. I've been in training and development in my career. I've been a wholesaler. I've been head of practice management. I've led a group at J.D. Power in the wealth solutions practice. So long time, 25 plus years in the broker dealer ecosystem or ecospace, and doing a wide variety of things, but all focused on driving greater performance and squeezing more out of the value proposition that advisors are delivering on, and ultimately helping clients realize what we consider to be the full power of financial advice.
You are absolutely the guy we want to be talking to then, if you're going to drive better performance. So thanks for joining us. Hey, tell us a little bit about Practice Intel. That's a relatively new venture. Catch us up on what PI is about.
Yeah, so Practice Intel is a performance management platform, and it's really geared towards accelerating growth and increasing enterprise value by fundamentally improving advice. And we've done that in many ways because we've done that in large part because of the challenges facing the industry. If we think about it, most advisors struggle with organic growth. Attrition is a real issue. And even when you get to the point of M&A, when you look at the disparity in quality of cash flow and quality of earnings in a business, it's pretty wide span. And we solve for all those things. Our work is actually grounded in modeling and research I did at J.D. Power. So it's grounded in some really deep consumer research that enabled us to identify what clients actually value most in an advisor. And Jack, guess what? It's not golf. It's not a client event. It's not even returns. But instead, it's a combination of 7 core attributes that really make for the advice experience. So we help firms measure, improve, and monetize the quality of advice and quality of client relationships, again, to accelerate growth and increase enterprise value.
So I'm going to guess that BI exists because there's a gap between what advisors think is going on in their world and what consumers are looking for. So what would be 2 or 3 things that your data and your experience tell you that advisors should know about the real state of their business?
Yeah, and that's a great way to put it. We like to call it what's the state of advice? And if you just if you take high-level view at some of the high-level dynamics in place, Jack, if you walk into a cocktail party and you walk up to a group of people you don't know and you say, hey, my name's Jack, I'm a financial advisor. What happens? Do those people lean in, or more likely are they going to lean out, right? So there's this perception of financial advisors as being just salespeople. Now, the reality is most are, based on the process they use for client engagement. But what we were able to identify are these, again, 7 attributes. And what clients actually value most, again, are really basic. They want advisors that have their best interests. They want advisors that understand them. They want advisors that deliver comprehensive advice. The analogy I like to use, if you think about a restaurant, if you walk into a restaurant, no matter how nice the space is, how good the music, how responsive the staff is, if the food that hits the table isn't spot on, the rest of it doesn't matter. And what we found is that the vast majority of clients say advisors are falling short of these key advice attributes, delivering on the core value proposition of our industry. Now, that's bad news, but it's really good news because it means we have a path for so many advisors, broker dealers, et cetera, to improve the quality of advice, drive organic growth, and as I mentioned, actually quantify and increase enterprise value.
I'm going to guess we're not talking about improving the quality of my Monte Carlo simulations,
Yeah, that's
right? When you say the quality of advice,
right.
okay? We're not trying to get to the 17th decimal point on my Monte Carlo simulation, but rather we're talking about an experience that we're trying to deliver that connects at a personal level, at a human level. Fair?
It is, yeah. And now I want to be careful because I think a lot of people are running with this human-centric advice moniker, which is valid. But if you think about what advice actually is, and whether it's in our industry or anywhere else, advice is simply helping people make good decisions. And if you're running with a process that is focused on helping people make good decisions in our industry, that means arguably decisions that align with their values, their goals, and their aspirations, good things will happen. What we tend to do mostly, and again, not with any ill intent, not with anything but the best, hope for a great outcome for everybody. But the sales process is really just focused on getting people to act on the recommendation. So if you are as an advisor and you're working with clients and the ultimate process leads to prescribing what they should do, that inherently makes it a sales process and a sales engagement versus an advice process, which says, hey, we're going to be collaborative, co-creative. We're going to empower you to make really good decisions. We're going to walk along with you like a Sherpa. But ultimately, we want to help you have a deep enough understanding of the process and what to do to make the decision yourself.
So that's a really interesting nuance you added there, and I want to dive into that just a little bit. So, in my experience with my clients, they're interested in solving whatever their problem is. Okay,
Mhm.
back to your cocktail party analogy. If someone says, "Man, I don't feel well," I'm sweaty. I've got cold palms. I'm not feeling quite right. If I'm a doctor, I'm going to say, those are symptoms of something. Let's dive a little deeper. Let's see if we can't figure out what's going on, right? So isn't that where the advisor model lives?
Well, sure, but so yes, and you said it's I can't did you use the word it's a nuance. It's actually a very marked difference between the two processes. They are similar on the surface, but the goal of them, the process, the relationships they create, and the ultimate outcomes are dramatically different. Now,
How so?
of course, we want to help the client figure it out. In a doctor-patient situation, it's going to be a little bit different. It is a prescriptive engagement. But in real advice, we want to equip the advisor to make really good decisions. And Jack, I don't want to get too caught up on this. This is actually really important process. It's nuanced, but it is process orientation. How can we re-architect our processes to deliver on a better experience? And the good thing about process is it's scalable. Now, if we go back to for a second, what we do as much at Practice Intel is collect data around what's going on with the client relationship. Because the biggest issue with many advisors is they do believe I'm doing a great job. My clients love me. There's nothing wrong. And there may not be anything wrong at all. But the real question is, how do you know? And what do your clients think? And once that emerges and you start to find gaps in those things that are really important to the client, then it's like, maybe I should start to evolve my practice. Then the question is, how do I evolve it? And that's where the process comes in, because intent doesn't always do it like I'm going to try harder, be more client-centric. Refinement isn't necessarily always that. A lot of times it's process re-architecting.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think a lot of advisors live in the Emperor's New Clothes kind of a mode, right?
Yeah.
They think it's great. They're rocking along. They're making, seven figures, but they got a retention problem. They got poor referrals. They've got, no engagement with the next gen, that sort of thing. Those are all symptoms that things aren't working so smoothly, right?
Yeah, and if you think of an advisor that is netting seven figures, I mean, that's probably an advisor who's doing some things right.
Oh, yeah.
in regard to the basic modeling. But then the question becomes, if this is a productive, highly profitable practice, you want to make sure there's not embedded attrition risk. Are there gaps that may detract from that could cause that to derail, right? So you're protecting it. But let's face it, so many advisors are more like the 250 to 500 range. And the question is, how do they ramp up? How can we scale that up? Or the new advisors coming in. So as they figure out how to be really good advisors, what are they focusing on? And in the old days, it's simply production, activity, all those things, versus are we doing things right from the perspective of the client? And are we doing those things that they value most? And are we enacting a process that really is advice and not just a client-centric, empathetic sales process?
So let's dive into that $250,000 to $500,000 guy for a second, because you're right. I mean, that's the heart of the market, if you will.
Mhm.
So what are things that you and JD Power found that are some of the big pieces that they're missing?
Yeah. So and anytime I mention JD Power, in my role there, which it's almost 2 years ago that I left, it's all published data. But what we found is one, that there was a pretty big disparity between the small percentage of advisors that were delivering on this ideal and the rest. And it really was pretty consistent across AUM, across client profile, and all of that. There was some nuances, but it was directionally pretty much the same. But the things that were the biggest gaps was, one, comprehensive advice. Only about half of clients said their advisor was delivering comprehensive advice. Less than half of clients said they understood the fees they were paying. A third or even more of clients couldn't say with certainty their advisor had their best interest in mind, or their advisor understood them. Now, think about those things. These are like fundamental core things that you would think, of course they're doing it. Well, they're not. How about this? Half of clients that have financial plans say they're not receiving comprehensive advice. So you think about the disconnect there.
That's not surprising to me, one iota.
Yeah.
So I know you've been out to Tiburon and with Chip Roma and his team, and one of the things that came out of their latest CEO summit was a question to the audience about what services are you adding? Okay, what are you going to do differently in the future? And it blew my mind, because I don't remember if it's number one or number two, but decumulation, retirement income strategies was number
Mhm.
one. Number two was more longevity planning. Number
Mm.
three was more Social Security planning. I'm going, hey, folks, it's peak 65. We got 4 million people a year turning age 65, and that's been going on for a few years. And we're just now starting to figure out that we need to do something about decumulation and longevity. I mean, come on. What's going on? I mean, that's a huge gap in my mind.
Well, and it goes back, and I mean, we can sit here and look at the deficiencies in our industry, and we still have very much a legacy sales culture, right? We grew up, and we've definitely moved the needle some, but we haven't moved it nearly far enough. And the real challenge is, if you look at the organic growth figures, when you think about it, most advisors struggle to realize really any meaningful organic growth. And what does that say about any value proposition, right? When someone advocates for you, and that's really the fuel, the foundation of a referral, is that actually someone is out there saying, "Hey, Jack's a really good guy. You should work with him." But if someone advocates for you, that's a sign, an attribution of value. And if you don't have people advocating, it's an attribution of little value. And that's really the challenge in our industry. I wrote a piece a couple of months ago for, I think it was Wealth Management, on how marketing isn't really the answer. Instead, it's strengthening the value proposition, right? If you have something that's less than compelling and undifferentiated, no matter how much you market it, the analogy, another food analogy, no matter how much you market a frozen hamburger out of a box, it's still a frozen hamburger out of a box. So the opportunity to help advisors grow, to help advisors increase enterprise value, and of course, rolling that up to the broker dealers and the massive organizations and that are housing and supporting all these advisors, and delivering a much better value prop to the client. Such a great opportunity. It's a win-win all the way around. So we can, talk about sort of the science behind it, and we can get sometimes wrapped up in it, but it's really about just strengthening the value prop and delivering on the full promise and reaping the rewards. I mean, across the board. And that's what we build a platform to help illuminate, to help improve, and to help monetize.
So where does the fit come in? I mean, if my value prop, if I built, a strong value prop around um, investment management, okay, it's that's going to be a tough slog for me. But it's not going to align so well, if someone comes to me and says, look, I've got lots of money. It's not about the investment. I'm worried about the tax and the legacy.
Mm-hmm.
So in that particular case, I'm not aligned. So somehow that prospect came on my radar, but I don't have the value prop that's aligned with their motivation, if you will, right?
Well, and that value prop, first of all, as we both know, that value prop is
Is dead.
commoditized as it is, right? But even beyond that, if we go back to this idea of advice, so if you think about helping people make good decisions and all financial decisions, which is going to include all the things, good investment decisions, tax planning, legacy planning, retirement planning, college planning, what do I do? Do I lease or do I buy? Do I start a new business? How much money can I put? All those things. That is a very comprehensive value proposition. So if an advisor embraces the more, and I'll use the word holistic or human-centric or comprehensive or whatever it is, and their value prop is simply, hey, my job is to help my clients make good decisions that align with the things that are most important, their values, their goals, and aspirations. We've got a process to help people work through that, to come to a point where they can make good decisions, and then we monitor and we adjust as we go along. We work together in that process. There's the value prop. And now, if I pause for a second on that, how that took no time. It's a really basic value prop, but it's also going to be pretty dramatically different than 9 out of 10 advisors out there. And more in line with what clients are thinking, oh, yeah, okay, that sounds interesting. Tell me more.
Because it's a little broader than I think most of us think, about how we want to define our value prop, because it's a little bit broader, what you end up doing is naturally differentiating based on the individual client experience.
Mm-hmm.
That the individual client experience is what's driving that. It's not that, it's not an assembly line, where clients come through and they all get Social Security planning and they all get processed, in the same sort of way. So when you step back and say, I'm going to do comprehensive planning, everybody doesn't need all aspects of comprehensive planning right now. That's my experience. They may need some of that now. They may need a different amount of that later, a different style of that in the future. So that's interesting, because that by the focusing on being more comprehensive is what really allows you to create the alignment. Is that what you're saying?
I think you're saying that, right? I mean, I think it's inherently being said. Think about it. By being more comprehensive, number one. And by the way, a lot of times people think, oh, that means having more products. And sure, you want to have all sorts of skills and abilities. You're going to have strategic partners that are delivering on different things. But by delivering on a holistic advice proposition, you actually are doing something that almost sounds like a bit of an oxymoron. You actually are delivering hyper-personalization. So process, and think about it, hyper-personalization is one of the key things people want, and it makes sense. The industry tries to deliver it, and of course, naturally makes sense to us as consumers. And it is inherently, well, let me rephrase it, the sales process is inherently limited. You're inherently limited in delivering hyper-personalization with the sales process, because it requires personalization through the power of the advisor. By helping people make good decisions, empowering them through the process, through the advice process, ultimately the responsibility for that ultimate decision is the client's, and inherently you gain hyper-personalization. So you hyper-personalize through process, and which is a really cool thing, because you can scale hyper-personalization. Now, pause on that one for a second. Scale hyper-personalization. It almost sounds like an oxymoron, but you absolutely can. And while you're at it, you can solve for the most fundamental best interest issues as well, because you're putting the decision-making in the hand of the client. And oh, by the way, you grow and you increase enterprise value and everybody wins. I mean, so tell me what's wrong with that.
Yeah. The only challenge is, how do you build that? Right. I mean, if you're an advisor, I mean, it takes a certain, mental capacity, skill, competency, whatever you want to label it, in order to be able to think comprehensively and holistically, and much less to be able to have that conversation with the client and then be able to pursue that to an outcome, right?
Yeah, so I thought about this recently. So we have 330,000 advisors in the US, and we know there's a variety of, big dispersion of sort of skill level. Does everybody deserve to make $1 million or $2 million a year? Should anybody be able to do that? And of course, the answer is no, right? It takes skill, it takes capability and competency. But with that said, yeah, you have to have the intellectual giddy up to grasp things holistically, but you would hope your advisor would do that anyway. But the great part about what we deliver is first the data that allows advisors to understand, are there gaps in what they're delivering? Where are those gaps? Which it not only it enlightens them, but it also motivates. Because wow, maybe there are some things that or not maybe, but there are some things I'm not doing that could create attrition risk, that are limiting, broader growth and so forth. But then it's the process that we provide. We have very specific advisor development content focused on the advice process, very granular, very specific narrative, process, language, so advisors can grasp that. Because it really is a matter of what I just said to you about helping clients make, good decisions, values that align with their values and aspirations. That is the content that we provide. And however you deliver that in your own natural way, it still comes across as, hey, my job simply to help you make good decisions. And here's a process to do it. And that is very, very scalable. And if you can't grasp that, I'd argue you probably shouldn't be an advisor.
That's a solution to a problem that most advisors don't recognize they have.
Yes.
And I think that's where the data that you talk about, the analytics, the diagnostics, come into play, right?
Yeah, I mean, listen, how many advisor coaching platforms and things are there out there? There's 1,000 of them, some very good and some just out there. But that's where the data comes in. So data does a wonderful thing. And by the way, and we think about the data we create is very different. It's really an alternative frame, performance management frame, kind of a catalyst for growth and enterprise value. Because most data is advisor data about the client. So it's production AUM, it's household, it's age, it's demographics, it's retention, all those things, very important. But what we create is client data about the advisor. And it's very specific data. I heard a phrase yesterday, and I loved it. One challenge with data is there's too much data. So a strategy is what's called data minimization. You want to just look at the data that has the most insight, the most powerful analytics. And that's what we do. We capture 15 data points. And then, of course, there's all sorts of cuts and demographic mixes of that, but 15 data points that absolutely matter most. And that's what gets the client, that's what gets the advisor to wake up, or the firm to wake up and go, wow, there are problems and we can solve them.
Right. And so what you're saying is the data you're gathering is from the client.
Correct. Yes.
The data you're gathering isn't necessarily from the advisor. We're not looking at it through the advisor's lens. We're looking at it through the consumer's lens, right? So how many advisors are out there who are thinking about that? I mean, yeah, we do surveys and, maybe we have some follow-up questions or whatever, or that kind of thing, feedback questions, but not really with rigor or with discipline, right?
No, and I love those two words, right? We utilize surveys to collect data. We create unique data sets at the practice level through ongoing client research, tracking sentiment over time. Now, those are all words I use that are institutional consumer research, framing, and process. And that's what we bring to the table. Is the questions we ask are specific based on, we're really replicating, like most research, we're replicating institutional consumer research that was industry level, but we're bringing all the way down to the practice level, which rolls up to the firm. And we do that because we know they lead to the most important analytics to drive growth.
So if I'm an advisor who's transitioned now to more of an enterprise kind of practice, okay? So I've got more than one advisor in the firm. So are we collecting data from each advisor's clients uniquely? Is that what we're doing?
Yes.
And then feeding that back to that advisor and then looking at it globally across the firm to say, here's the perception of the firm, across all the clients. Are we doing all of that?
So yeah, so let's take a firm, let's say that has 11,000 advisors.
Yeah.
So we are collecting data at the advisor level. The data comes back anonymized to the advisor. Now they can segment by different client profiles and things like that, so they can get more granular. But the reason we anonymize it because there's compliance risks in the data. If they collected it directly, they'd basically be collecting reportable events. So we protect them from that. But then, of course, the firm is simply made up of the aggregate of all of the advisors. So the firm has an understanding of where they fall at a high level, but then we provide analytics and tracking at the enterprise level. So imagine benchmarking and stack ranking, not just based on AUM and productivity and appointments and whatever size of household, but now we're stack ranking by quality of advice and quality of relationship, all the sub attributes or any combination of those sub attributes to not only identify the best performers for a variety of reasons. Maybe your orphans, you want to put your orphan accounts to the best advisor. Well, maybe now you give it to the highest AUM or something like that now, but instead you think, I really want to give it to the person with the best client relationships, which by the way, is going to be highly correlated to AUM. But as we know, you can have high AUM and not necessarily have really great client relationships. You have people doing good business in the wrong way, right? And then the flip side of that, in terms of risk mitigation, imagine stack ranking worst to best, lack of best interest or best interest and doesn't understand fees. I mean, there's tremendous amount of compliance risk baked into that, and we can illuminate that for firms. And before we finish, I'll make sure I get to the enterprise value part because that all spins off of that as well. What we end up having is a lot of additional analytics to make decisions around resource allocation. What are we improving? Where are we improving? Again, around these KPIs, these strategic drivers of exceptional advocacy, which lead to organic growth, total wallet share, and exceptional advocacy, which is the key to organic growth. But we're also measuring the both quality, the level of advocacy, and the quality and value of the experience being advocated for through our relationship quality index score and relationship quality index profile. There's 5 metrics that attribute value to the client relationship. The higher that number, the more embedded growth and the stronger, stickier, more resilient the client relationship. So really what that translates into is quality of cash flow and quality of earnings. So the firm has the ability to measure not only things that drive organic growth, but then spit off a metric that can be attributable to higher multiples in an exit or a liquidity event.
This has been amazing. I love this conversation, and I think more advisors need to engage in this. So as we're sitting here, getting ready to ramp up into 25. So what are 2 or 3 things that advisors should be doing to really set the table for themselves for 25, based on what you know?
Yeah, well, I think the first and most important thing is to have clear insight into what's actually happening, and that means using a platform like Practice Intel to understand what their clients really think about what they're providing. Where are their gaps? Where there's opportunities to improve? One of the things to do, another way to look at that is to say, analyze, how is your organic growth? Are you having lots and lots of referrals? Are people advocating? Are people talking about you in a way that is really a buzz? And if that's the case, you're probably doing a lot of things right. If it's not the case, it's a clear indicator that the value prop you have is middling at best. And if you really want to ramp up, if you want to coast off into the future, good deal. God bless you, right? But if you want to ramp up and improve the quality of what you're delivering to your clients through their eyes and grow more, create more enterprise, more practice value so you can exit more successfully down the road, then you need to understand where you stand today. You need to shine a light on the truth. Not to be too biblical here, but that's exactly what that is, right? Shine a light on the truth. What do your clients think and where can you improve?
Yeah. We're just wrapping up a survey for Q4. We call it growth benchmarks, and one of the questions we asked in that was, so what percentage of your clients give you at least one referral this year?
Mhm.
Um, 70% of the respondents said less than 10%.
There you go.
That's not a healthy situation. A good friend of ours said, if you don't get at least one referral from each client, that client isn't fully engaged with you. And so there's something there from a relationship perspective that's missing. And to me, I think that's a good litmus test, a good starting point. And it's really eye-opening because I know we say that referrals are the number one source of new business for people. But if you look at the fastest growing firms, they're getting business from lots of other places, but they're not ignoring referrals. So yeah, that's really an important factor, I think.
And Jack, just to pull on that thread a little more. So the way you just said that, it's really a matter of looking back to the advisor. It's not a question, is the client engaging enough? It's really a reflection of the value, the veracity of the value prop of the advisor. So that it's a clear reflection that there is something that's pretty darn underwhelming. And by the way, if that's the case, so if referrals or lack of referrals are canaries in the coal mine, right? Referrals are saying, hey, we're doing something right. We're delivering something that's powerful enough for someone to externalize an internal belief. I love this so much, I got to tell other people about it. That will clearly then resonate through the other centers of influence and so forth. So maybe that is the thing to do, to look back and how many referrals you're getting. And if you're not, really rethink your strategy moving forward. And you can use Practice Intel as a great platform to help.
Yeah, it's hard. I know as an advisor, if you're having some success, it's hard to look yourself in the mirror and say, I'm missing the boat on something. You know what I mean? That's a tough conversation to have with yourself, but really we've got to. I mean, the market's been on a tear. The chaos, from a tax perspective, the influx of retirement, the money in motion. There are so many things happening that drive business in spite of what we do as advisors, right?
Indeed.
To be able to sit back and say honestly, hey, it's not about me. There's $127 trillion in motion. If I just stand out and say, hey, I'm a financial advisor, I'm going to get something in my bucket, right?
Indeed. And I mean, just going back to the beginning of that, listen, if you're a professional, you inherently relook and examine what you're doing. And if you're fearful of taking a look at that, you're a product salesperson. I'm going to say that out loud, but it's like, got it, but you are the masses. You're not amongst the true professionals in our business. And we need more true professionals in our business. And that's, so that to me, a great goal here over the next, let's say 5 years would be to move the needle in terms of the percentage of clients that actually perceive their advisor as delivering good advice. So think about it. Reframing performance management, reframing how we view good performance, because metrics, what we measure, greatly influences what we do. So as we have conversations at the C-suites, which is where we do have a lot of our conversations, that's part of it. If you want to change the culture, start measuring other things and people will snap into place pretty quickly, and then provide the process, the tools and the resources so they know how to better perform. It's not just like, come on, be taller, run a better route, right? But actually show them how to do it and provide the resources, then track the improvement and then compensate for that as well. So lots to do.
100%.
Yeah.
Hey, this has been a great conversation. I really enjoyed it. Thank you, Tom. Any final nuggets you want to drop, wisdom you want to drop before we sign off?
Just be the best, man. Recognize that being a financial professional takes more than a lot of people think. And I just say that you use the words rigor and discipline and process and data. Be data driven, be process oriented, serve the clients in the way that we're fully capable, and you will be massively successful, because that is differentiating in itself today. So just go do it. Lean in.
Hey, folks, thanks for joining us on the Breakthrough Advisor podcast today. Please like, share, subscribe, wherever you get your podcasts. There are links on the page where you can connect to Tom to learn more about Practice Intel. I really encourage you to do that. Until next time, thank you very much for joining us today. This has been Jack Martin with Simplicity InsurMark and the Breakthrough Advisor podcast. Thanks and have a great day.
Thank you for listening to the Breakthrough Advisor podcast. Click the subscribe button below to be notified when new episodes become available. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of InsurMark. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only.